I started sculpting this mask in 2024. This video is proof to myself and hopefully encouragement to others that we can and will finish the projects that sit patiently unfinished in the corners of our craft rooms. I am editing this on the first spring-like day of 2026, and some of these masks are actually up for sale on our website, backtoearthcreations.com. After 2 years, I am so happy to finally be able to share both painted and unpainted versions of this mask design for either you to, if you want to purchase one and wear some of our artwork as part of your costumes, or if you wanted to get one and paint it yourself and make it your own before wearing it, and hopefully sharing pictures with us of what you did with, the mask and how you accessorized it and stuff. We love getting to see that kind of stuff. But that being said, what I'm doing here is I am sculpting a dragon mask out of Cos clay. It's a rubberized polymer clay, and this was my second attempt at a mask ever, and my first attempt at doing a dragon mask that sits over the face as opposed to one of our previous designs that is more of a headdress. After baking the cosplay mask for 45 minutes at 275 degrees Fahrenheit, I let everything cool down and start building a dam around where the mold will be made. I am using Monster Clay for this. Monster Clay is a modeling clay that's reusable, and it's sulfur-free, so it's perfectly safe to use with the silicone we're going to be using. But it's oil-based, so it's the warmer it is, the softer it is. You can actually make it liquidy for pouring into molds. But whenever it's like cold and at room temperature, it's nice and hard. It comes in a couple of different grades, soft, medium, hard. And I'm using the medium here just because that's what I have. The first layer of silicone is applied thinly and carefully to capture as much detail as clean as we can. I don't want any bubbles or any, gaps in the mold, so this first layer is really important. I'm using Rebound 25 by Smooth On. It is a self-thickening platinum cure silicone rubber that it brushes on really well. We mix and apply 4 layers following the manufacturer's instructions. The chip brush that we were using kept shedding its bristles, but we made it work, and we resorted to using the stir stick to trowel on the final layers. In the 3rd and 4th layer, we did add a few drops of Thivex to the silicone compound to make it really nice and thick for filling in any big undercuts or gaps. I make the mother mold, or the supportive shell for the silicone, out of freeform air. This is the project where we learned that you can only glob this stuff on so thick, as we got some interesting expanding and cracking as it cured. I ended up cutting the mother mold in half, with a saw, and grinding a groove for a hair tie to hold the halves together. It is super jank, but if it works, it works. To fill the mold, we use 50 grams of freeform air, so 25 grams each of parts A and B. I mix them thoroughly with gloved hands and pack the mold, focusing on the horn tips, the details deep into the nose, and any of the fine details of the scale work before just filling in and packing in all of the rest of the freeform air. A finger dipped in water is an excellent smoothing and blending tool, and I have my dirty little teacup specifically for my freeform air water because it starts to develop a buildup on the inside of the cup. So once you've used a cup for it, that's just its designated cup now. A sheet of cling wrap over the face of our, we have a glass head that we use as a face shape, and the cling wrap sprayed with some water acts as a great repel as I take the mold and squish it onto the face just to give the nose and the cheekbones and stuff a little bit more of a consistent shape. And then I remove the cling wrap and re-smooth it with my finger again. In 24 hours, we have a full cure and are ready to unmold. I remove the mother mold shell and carefully peel the silicone away from our cast mask. A craft knife and rasp work wonderfully to remove any flashing and extra freeform air. All the tools and materials that I am using are linked in the video description if you're interested in making your own projects. I try to be as thorough as I can, starting at one edge of the perimeter of the mask and working my way all of the way around. And I make note of any chipped horn tips or empty gaps or anything that's going to need further touched up with another layer of freeform air as I'm going through rasping, just because I make these masks in batches. That way, whenever let's say we have like 6 or 7 of the masks already cast, and I go through and I clean them up all at once, and then I go through and do the touch-ups on the horn tips and the noses and just anywhere that it might need just a little extra TLC. I go ahead and give it attention then with another batch of freeform air. I have found that freeform air adheres to itself very well, but it can have some trouble sticking initially. I use water on my gloved fingertips to assist in applying and shaping the fresh freeform air. The water keeps it from sticking to me as badly, but it also makes it cling to itself a little better, especially when it's as fluffy and freshly mixed as what I'm working with here. It can get a little frustrating fiddling with tiny bits of this sculpting medium, but I remind myself to be patient, both with myself and with the project. And my favorite, after doing 7 of these masks, my favorite way of adhering is to just make a little bit of a slurry, like really, really gooey bit of freeform air by working a lot of water into it, and then using that a little bit as like a slip to just put on the spots that need more clay on it, and then to add more clay. And it's like putting down a bit of glue or a bit of Sculpey Bake and Bond. If you're used to working with polymer clay, it works very similarly to that concept, that it's just a nice adhesion layer. And that helped, but it was really frustrating figuring that out. So I hope that that's helpful to some of y'all. Now that I have a little bit of the freeform air applied to the horn tips, I'm going to let it sit for about 30 minutes because right now the freeform air is so fluffy and difficult to work with. So then I'm just going to let it set up and we will continue sculpting once it's a little firmer. Now that it has been long enough that the freeform air is starting to stiffen up, I can come through with a dampened finger and blend, or my favorite is to use an old paintbrush because this typically kind of ruins the bristles. So when a paintbrush is on its last leg, like if it's losing a lot of bristles or it's just time, I sacrifice a paintbrush to the project, and I like to use the handle to blend down, pulling the uncured clay or the uncured freeform air over the already cured piece. And we can kind of use our fingers we like. We'll need to keep it damp because otherwise it lifts off some of that sculpting medium. And just working in a very little bit at a time. I always admire the sculptors who seem to be, to my novice's eye, very deliberate and effective with their sculpting, whereas I feel like I just pet it until it looks right. So I don't know what these other sculptors are doing that makes them look like they know what they're doing, but I do not feel like I have that. But I also don't feel like I super duper need it, because if I'm happy with how it comes out, then petting it until I was happy seems to be a perfectly effective strategy. I may not be the fastest sculptor, I'm certainly not the best sculptor, but I'm having a blast, and that's the important part. Because if we're not having fun, then why are we doing this? So yeah, don't forget to enjoy what it is that you're doing. Just being gentle and patient with yourself and with the project. There we go. And I'm not looking for the mask to be perfect because we still have some like weird, interesting texture here. But I just use that as an opportunity to be like battle damage, or this might be a mossy or earth-toned dragon. And I think that would be a lot of fun. So I just kind of roll with it because if I wanted it to be perfect, I'd be sitting here for days and days and days trying to get every little detail just spot on. Whereas let it be beautiful for what it is. When all of our freeform air is nice and cured, I like to come through and make a little bit of a wash, like a very heavy wash of acrylic paint. And we are going to just scrub this with a relatively stiff bristled brush, just because I like the scratchy, assertive nature of it. It really helps get everything down into those nooks and crannies, whereas a softer brush would just kind of gently go over them. But you can make do with what you've got. And I am just going to scrub this acrylic paint into all the nooks and crannies. If it weren't very cold outside, I would do you see? We don't want to just be dry brushing. We want it to get down into those cracks. So I'm being very heavy and generous with our paint. If it weren't very cold outside, I would be doing this with my airbrush, and I would just use the air to force the paint in, but it's like 13 degrees outside, and I'm not gonna go out there, and I don't know enough about what I'm doing to know if the airbrush is going to be affected, and like I don't like if my pump would freeze up. I don't know if the paints would freeze. Like that's cold, yo. So at least for the winter, hand painting it is. We're having a kitty break. After drilling the holes for the elastic band, I do a second coat of black acrylic paint to touch up any areas I missed the first time around. I hang the masks to dry fully using some chopsticks and dowels and just whatever I have. Once that base coat is completely dry, I like to come through with a heavy-bodied acrylic, just white acrylic paint, and I am dry brushing to catch the high points because this is going to give us a very bright color layer whenever we come through to apply the colors for the masks and paint them up to look like how you want your dragon to look. I use the same techniques of painting regardless of what color scheme I'm doing, where I paint like the mid-tone color and then I go through and add some low light areas with like a darker color, and then I go through and I add some highlight areas. And that's just the very most basic, if I'm doing nothing else on the mask, I at least do those three things. But this is an opportunity to go wild with your creativity. Once the paint's dried, if you don't like it, you can just go over it with another color. Also, the freeform air sands really well. You kind of got to be careful with it that you don't remove too much material, but you can kind of sand off some of the acrylic paint if you find that it's like problematic. You just got to watch out that you don't take off too much. But yeah, on the very first one of these masks that I painted, I did like 5 or 6 different color batch schemes, and so there were a lot of layers of paint on there, but it held up really well, and just making sure that you let each layer of paint dry fully will keep it from getting gummy and like weird buildup. Be sure to check out our YouTube shorts and our different social media accounts because I will be posting how we did the painting, like the painting process of some of our other dragon masks. Hopefully to share, how I do it and hopefully inspire y'all to paint your own dragon masks. And also I learned so much. Like I learned so much more as a teacher than what I do just being out on my own. So I really appreciate everybody who in the comments gives suggestions and critiques and sharing your ideas and your thoughts. Like thank you guys so much. I learned so much and get so inspired from y'all. I loop one long length of quite thin. I can't remember the measurement, but it's linked down in the video description. But it's just the thinnest elastic. I think it's 1/16 elastic cord, and I do a length of that long enough to go around like 2 layers, because you can always tie it tighter, but if you don't put enough elastic band on there, then you're gonna be getting your noggin squeezed when you're wearing the mask, and that's no fun for anybody. So far, I haven't found a favorite acrylic varnish yet on these ones. I just used Mod Podge Hard Coat, but I'm open to suggestions for if y'all have any recommendations of what varnish or sealer I should use with this. And I leave the insides unlined because whatever lining I choose, it's always the wrong one for the customer. Some folks prefer foam, some folks prefer unlined. Some folks like to use felt or moleskin, so they adhere very easily with either super glue or hot glue. Or some of them have their own adhesive backs that you can use, but it all applies quite easily and securely to the inside of the freeform air. And of course, they fluoresce under black light because why not?